Welcome back to The Other Perspective with Ananya, Lydia, Serene, and Ellie. 4 students shedding light on the untold stories of global issues and topics.
More often than not, people aren't frustrated by how others are protesting, but rather the message behind the protest. What's more is they're willing to sacrifice the integrity of their beliefs and create different rules for different groups just to prove a point. This infatuation with double standards has not only cost people their careers, but also their lives.
This week, we continue our conversation with Michael Adey and Carrie Faust about the issues our current social climate has brought to light. The story started with taking a knee.
Today, we have 2 wonderful guests here to help us deconstruct our double standards and understand the importance of our voice as citizens. Let's take it from the top.
I think back to the time when Colin Kaepernick first started to shed light on this issue of police brutality by peacefully taking a knee. But in the media, he was portrayed as this villain. He was dismissed. Yeah, in today's day, when there are nationwide protests going on, people are saying that we have to go back to the so-called peaceful way. But people weren't happy with that way. People aren't happy with this way. So I guess people aren't happy with anything.
How about the NFL commissioner being called out for his hypocrisy, saying that we stand for the Black Lives Matter movement, but you allowed that guy to be fired, vilified, blacklisted. I don't know that much about him as a football player, but apparently he was a pretty good quarterback, and he's not playing. But we've got felons on the field, and we've got people who beat their wives on the field. But this guy, because he peacefully took a knee to draw attention to what is obviously a problem in our country, doesn't get to make a living anymore.
Right. Such a beautiful form of protest, I think. Just absolutely wonderful. So
respectful. Yeah. Yes. Dignified.
I remember seeing this post on Instagram. It was of a side-by-side tweet from this company, and it was when Colin Kaepernick, the first one, it was when Colin Kaepernick, he first started kneeling at his games, and they tweeted, they were like, oh, this is unacceptable, he shouldn't be doing this. And then the current day tweet, with all this this whole movement going on, they said, you guys need to protest more peacefully. And I was genuinely shocked. How can you do such a 180? How can you contradict yourself?
I think the memes that are rolling around today, you can protest, but not like that. Oh, right. Really? Right. Here are the 5 other ways we have protested, and you didn't like those either. Right. The problem is you don't like what we're protesting because you like the status quo. You like the institutional racism that has elevated you in society. You don't want your privilege denigrated by someone else having privilege. I don't even understand that way of thinking. If I have a car and you have a car, that doesn't mean that I don't have a car.
Right.
Literally. How does November and the elections play into all of this?
It takes 30 seconds to register online for those who are 18 or going to be in time for election. Mm-hmm. And I think, gosh, my biggest hope for what's happening with all of this is that our young people finally show up. Mm-hmm. They have the lowest voting percentage, and I just want to see it be a wave of kids on their skateboards rolling up to vote. I just want to see it.
I firmly believe in the phrase "silence is complicity." I try to live by that. And in my opinion, not voting is remaining silent. And so you
Amen.
Are in whatever crap follows suit.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that people don't only not only that they vote, but also that they research kind of who they're voting for, what bills or whatever when it comes time. Because I feel oftentimes people vote either oh, I'm affiliated with this party, or my parents
just go down ballot.
Mm-hmm.
So and I think just connecting that to media, media's really helped with that, I know, because you have Rock the Vote, and they'll be yeah, your primary's this date or whatever, or they'll have they'll do on Instagram they'll have slides or whatever that kind of explain bills or different things like that, and I think that kind of helps simplify it for people, so even if they aren't willing to go and seek out those extra resources, I mean, you're going to be scrolling through Instagram anyway, right? So like it helps.
It is far easier to get information and educate yourself today than it ever has been in the past. Of course, that goes back to media literacy to make sure that you're getting good information. You know, one of the few things my father and I do agree on, he gave me advice years and years ago. He said, not every candidate is going to be the perfect candidate for you. You're not going to agree with any candidate on everything, but what you need to do is decide what is the number one most important issue to you. What is important to you? What is the thing that is a non-negotiable for you? And then you research on that subject to start with, and that's how you figure out who to vote for and what to vote for, because there's a lot of things out there to consider these days.
Yeah, and I always tend to think of it as like trajectory, right? Like I may not agree with everything that a politician. In fact, I never have ever completely agreed with a politician. I've got a lot of distrust for politicians, but don't. But I always look at it as like, is this person moving more in the direction that I want to see our society move in? Knowing that there's going to be things that they believe or try to put in place that I disagree with, but mostly are they headed in a direction that I agree with?
I think that unless you're the one running for the position, you're never going to see eye to eye.
Right.
This isn't a new issue, so why is it taking so long for this issue to gain momentum?
Because there was this culture that I believe still exists where police officers, or I should say entities, absolutely they have a hard job. They protect themselves, and there is a code of silence that if somebody that you've worked with does something wrong, you don't say anything about it. And in that way, you help protect them. But then that hurts the population. And if their job really is to serve and protect, then that whole idea has just been eroded completely, right? But this is something it goes back who knows how far. But we're like really on, I think, the precipice of true change, because people can't hide anymore, because it's people are starting to realize like the video is so devastating, and especially to watch 3 other men sit there and do nothing about it. And I'm sure you've heard this story, and I'm gonna mix up what city it was in, but there was a female officer who did try to stop one of her colleagues from hurting somebody, and she lost her job, she lost her pension, she lost her paycheck, everything taken from her, right? So it is a maze, a very messy maze that has been created over decades, and I would argue centuries, that has allowed for police presence to be the way that it is now. But I think we're starting to unravel that mess. I think.
How has technology shaped how people get information?
Since we have basically an entire population who all have video cameras in their hands now, what we're seeing, to some people may seem like it's new, but it's not. These things have been going on literally for centuries in our country, but it was much easier to cover up and brush aside. But now the proof is right there,
because we're all media. Literally any single one of us can report live at any time. And
even when we, like the advent of dashboard cameras in cops, which goes back to like the late 80s, early 90s, you guys, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the name Rodney King or not, but he was a African-American man who got beaten by LAPD, and it was on film. It was on the camera from the cop car, and the cops were exonerated. They got off.
Wow, I did not know that, and that is absolutely unbelievable. That reminds me of a post that I saw that said that they didn't arrest George Floyd's killers because they saw the video. They arrested them because we saw the video.
Exactly.
Yeah, something that was interesting to me is like my family, like back home, obviously, if you guys saw like the global protests that are happening in like France, Tokyo, like all over the world. And
Right.
I have a friend who like he came from Algeria because like he was telling me the story about how he was one of the protests there, and then they would just snatch them like from their houses, and obviously it's not like the U.S. And since it was like the coronavirus time, like everyone was just in their houses, and so that's why he had to come to the U.S. because he had like a military like general friend who told him he was on the list that they were coming from him. So he came here, and when I like was talking to him about like how I wanted to go to the protest, he was like, "No, like if you don't get it on camera, like you will like I don't trust them at all." And I had my brother because I don't know if like globally if the media and journalism like if it has the same rules because they've been covering the protests as well. And I had my brother who's living in Tunisia, and he called me and he was like, "What is going on?" But I don't know what he's talking about, like what he has saw versus what I've been saying. So,
well, many other countries have state-run TV, which simply means that the quote news in the country can only report what the government tells them they can report. And often that's from the government's perspective. We are the only country truly that has the First Amendment as it is. And people say Canada. Well, Canada doesn't actually have a First Amendment in the way that we do. In America, hate speech it's okay. You're allowed to be hateful. What you can't do is cause someone to be harmed. Like you can say I hate this sector of people. You can't say go out and kill this sector of people. Those are two different things. One's a command and the other one's an opinion. Um, but whereas in Canada, you can't say I hate this sector of people. That's considered hate speech and is punishable by law. So when it comes to freedom of speech and freedom of the press and freedom of religion and freedom to assemble and the ability to petition, other countries don't truly have that, although some have a slight version of it. So to answer your question, what he's saying is what they see there and what we see here are two different things because our press is independent from the government.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to have that separation.
Oh my gosh, that's why the press is considered the fourth branch. Each is a check on the other. So we've got the legislative, we've got the judicial, and then we've got the presidency, the executive. And the press's job is to call them all on what they do. The press is the watchdog of society. And I would say to you that while the press has changed in the last 20 years because of the advent of online and the speed up of the media cycle, the best thing that's happened to it is that we are all press now. We are all able to report. We are all able to shine a bright light on injustice and truth and all the things that we should be thinking of.
And you can throw it all the way back to Thomas Jefferson, who is controversial himself, but he said there should be a revolution in the United States every 4 years. And he's talking about the election, really, that this country was built and the democracy is structured in such a way that our government should reflect the needs of the people at that time, not remain in power.
Yeah.
And our government should be held accountable at all times. The moment they're not working for us, their time should be done.
Out.
Mm-hmm.
I had a quick question about generalizations. So I know in our theory of knowledge class we talked about this idea of generalizations, and I've been seeing it a lot more in news lately. Like I've seen posts when talking about police officers, they say you can't generalize a whole group of police officers because of a few bad ones. but it's those same people that are generalizing a group of protesters, because when the same theory apply that you can't generalize a whole group of protesters because of a few people who are looting or rioting. So I guess where is the line between good generalizations, bad generalizations? Is there a good and bad? Just how do we approach this idea of generalizations?
It's neither. And it's something that we can't get away from. We have to generalize to some degree. People throw that word around as a verbal weapon to try to silence other people and say, you're not all cops are bad. You're generalizing. That means that you're a bad person with bad opinions, right? To be general about it. Ha ha ha.
Well, and I think you're absolutely right with that. And I think when you talk about generalities are also human nature in the same way that bias is human nature. And generalities allow people to create sense out of something they don't fully understand. Generalities allow them to say, well, 4 out of 5 times I have seen this, so this must be true, without them having to delve further into it. They also allow you to, going back to that echo chamber, it allows you to be comfortable with your own perceptions instead of having to work hard to determine whether your perceptions are correct or not. And I think that the idea of not all cops are bad and not all people who get hurt by cops were innocent or not innocent, or whatever the generality is they want to dabble in, it prevents us from having the deeper conversation, and it prevents us from actually addressing the issue. And as Mr. Ady was saying, right now we're living in a time where people can't rest on their generalities. They can't rest in their comfort zones. There's too much evidence being thrown at them that demands that they look at something a different way. And I think for many, many people, my age and older, it is a very uncomfortable thing for them. And I think we will see more turmoil before it gets better, because people's norms are being shattered all over America and the world right now. And a lot of those norms weren't healthy, so I'm thrilled that they're being shattered, but change is very uncomfortable, and we're all going to get a lot more uncomfortable with this before it gets right. We're closer to it getting right than we've ever been in my lifetime and in the lifetime of this country. And I saw this video today that 3 African-American males at a protest, and there was an older man. He was 51. And I only know this because of the dialogue that went on between them. And he was 46. This 31-year-old was yelling at him for being angry. He says, I am angry too, but your anger hasn't changed anything, and my anger hasn't changed anything. And then he grabbed this boy, this young man. Have you guys seen this video I'm talking about with the 16-year-old?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, he didn't get it right. I haven't gotten it right. You guys have to get it right. It is your turn. And it is this, and I'm seeing on many different sides and many different angles of these issues we're dealing with right now, nobody is comfortable. Everybody's bubbles are exploding right now. People who just want to be on the side of the cops are learning that that's not where they're going to be. And people who just want to be on the side of the marginalized victim said that's not exactly where they can be either. And they have to find a new place to settle. It doesn't feel good, but that's why people keep going to their generalities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Imagine being afraid of the people who are supposed to protect you.
When people peacefully protest for the Black Lives Matter movement, they are met with violence, tear gas, and the ultimatum of choosing between freedom of expression and their careers. Yet, when armed white men protested at the Capitol against a pandemic, their right to do so was respected and propagated by prominent personalities like President Trump.
These double standards serve as a foundation to the division of our society. They detract from our ability to comprehend that double standards are complex and deeply rooted in systemic oppression. It's only when we acknowledge these inequities that we will be able to shatter the divides.
We'd like to thank our guests, Michael Adey and Carrie Faust, for taking their time to expose these dualities and how we can combat them. And remember, a change in perspective starts with one story. This story started with one man who took a knee to take a stand.
I'm Lydia. I'm Serene.
This is Ananya.
I'm Ellie, and we challenge you to look at the other perspective.